welcome back to Urban X-Files. My name is Keith and today I'm going to talk about some more paranormal experiences in the city of Liverpool. And today it is about the Playhouse Theatre. Originally, the Star Music Hall was constructed in 1866 as a replacement for the Old Star Concert Hall, which had stood on the same site for roughly 20 years previously. There were several name changes and structural additions later. Later the building finally settled on its current title of the Liverpool Playhouse Theatre, and that was in 1917. It is a Grade 2 listed building and stands on Williamson Square, right next to the rear of St John's Shopping Centre. Despite a brief closure between 1999 and 2000, the theatre is very much in use. There are many notable actors who once belonged to the resident theatre group at the Playhouse, which include Anthony Hopkins and Syria McClellan. Given the theatre's long history, it should perhaps come as no surprise that it is reputedly to be very haunted. However, the Playhouse seems to have more than its fair share of ghosts, and if the stories are to be believed, then we are in for a treat. It is reported that during its refurbishment in 1999, odd goings-on at the Playhouse actually prompted a walkout by the workmen that were involved. Doors were apparently opening and slamming shut on their own accord, and taps would turn themselves on and off, and a dark presence was felt by some of the workers. The theatre's most famous ghost is that of Elizabeth, once a cleaner at the Old Star Music Hall. Elizabeth was killed in 1897 when a fire curtain descended unexpectedly, knocking her into the orchestra pit and breaking her neck in the process. The death was recorded as an accident, but since the curtain was controlled manually, there was always some suspicion of foul play. Certainly, Elizabeth seems to have had some unfinished business, as she is reported to still visit the theatre, sitting in seat A5, up in the galley, which is always cold and spooky, according to the theatre manager. The Playhouse also boasts not one but two separate grey ladies, one seen wandering around the area, which is now a coffee bar, and the other to be reported in an upstairs rehearsal room, which was formerly a smaller secondary theatre. And there was an article that was published in the Liverpool Echo on the 30th of October in 2006. The actress Pauline Daniels asserted that she herself has had two separate encounters with alleged ghosts while performing in the theatre. The first took place in 1986 when Pauline was appearing in a play called Gypsy. Whilst in a dressing room preparing for the show, the door of her room was opened and a woman's voice exclaimed, "That looks fantastic." Pauline turned to see who had paid her a compliment, but there was no one there, and no sound of footsteps leaving the area. She was later told by a member of staff that it could have been the spirit of the old wardrobe mistress who had died some years previously. Pauline's second encounter took place around 1996, while she was preparing for her performance in Shirley Valentine. On stage one evening, she caught sight of a gentleman sitting alone in one of the theatre's private boxes. On stage one evening, he was dressed in a top hat, an old-fashioned suit and cape, and when she glanced backwards towards the box only moments later, the gentleman had completely vanished. Pauline's description of this well-turned-out chap seems to correlate with the story of a gentleman who, according to a press officer, Pippa Taylor, is reputed to haunt the theatre looking for his lost daughter. The girl is supposed to have run away from home to join the theatre around 1911. Her father perpetually continued his search for her even after his own death. So this is the story of the Everyman Theatre. I hope you enjoyed this, not the Everyman, sorry, the Playhouse. There's that many theatres in Liverpool, I get mixed up. So I hope you enjoyed this story, and as I say, these were inspired by John Rippian, who's the author of 800 Years of Liverpool. As I've mentioned in a few of the other videos, I really suggest, if you're interested in things like this, to go and buy his book. It is a really good read. I enjoy it myself, and I've read it multiple times. So anyway, take care, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace. Actually, while we're on the subject of theatres, I'll have another story for you. Again, this is in Liverpool, and this is in one of Liverpool's more famous theatres. This is the story of the Empire Theatre's ghost. It was named the Empire Theatre in 1896, prior to which it had been known as the New Prince of Wales Theatre and Opera House, the Royal Alexandra Theatre and Opera House, and the Alexandra Theatre. Parts of the theatre have stood on the corner of Lime Street and London Road since 1866. The building is now Grade 2 listed, and the Empire is the largest theatre in Liverpool and the largest two-tier theatre in the whole of the United Kingdom, with a capacity of over 2,000 people. As with the Playhouse Theatre, it is not so much the fact that the theatre is reputedly to be haunted that it is surprising given its age, and it's the sheer volume of spooks that are said to call this place their home. In the late 1950s, a Liverpool-born singer calling himself Michael Holiday shot to fame. Holiday his real name was Norman Alexander Milne, and he was a crooner, very much in the style of Bing Crosby, and had two #1 hit singles, The Story of My Life and Starry Eyed, and in 1958 and 1959 retrospectively. Holiday's life was not altogether a happy one. He suffered terribly from stage fright, which gradually worsened as his notoriety increased. In October of 1963, following a mental breakdown, Holiday was found dead of a suspected drug overdose in his home in Surrey. A figure resembling that of Michael Holiday, wearing a silver suit and sporting a black brilled cream hair, has allegedly been seen around the taxi rank at the back of Lime Street railway station, adjacent to the theatre's stage door. The apparition is said to loiter around the area, having a smoke, just as many performers have done in the past and continue to do this today, before eventually heading towards the theatre's stage door, where he disappears. The first documented report of a spirit being seen inside the Empire Theatre comes from 1926, when the actor, dancer, acrobat, singer, liberalist, director and short story writer Stanley Lupino was performing in a show called Better Days. A male figure wearing white face paint with large black circles drawn around his eyes was seen by Mr. Lupino and two stagehands. The figure is said to have grimaced and shaken his fist at the stagehands, one of whom, a man by the name of George Friday, reportedly died 3 days later after letting out a blood-curdling scream. This entity has gained the nickname of Old Pasty Face and has apparently been seen again by maintenance men in more recent years. Allegedly, the most common sighted spectre is that of a young girl in Victorian clothes. For more than 40 years, staff have reported seeing a girl crying in the area adjacent to the stall's bar, usually just as the theatre is being closed for the night. She is said by some to be the child who fell to her death from the circle into the stalls during the late 1880s, but there is no record of any such happenings. If approached, the girl is said to simply fade, but on some occasions something entirely more unsettling has been reported. A tall, thin man, described as either having very dark eyes or no eyes at all, is sometimes said to appear suddenly and drag the sobbing girl away into the darkness of the unlit theatre. Could this figure be the same entity as Old Pastyface? Certainly they seem to share a certain eye-catching characteristics. For years, an apparition known as the Phantom in Black was supposedly glimpsed reflected in the mirror of dressing room S, stage right. So many performers complained of seeing the black shape that the room was converted into a walk-in wardrobe in 1998. Other spirits said to frequent the theatre include those of Arthur Lucan, famous for portraying the character of Old Mother Riley on stage and the screen between 1930 and 1950, and a gentleman dressed as a schoolboy thought to be either Jimmy Clitheroe or wee Georgie Wood, both of whom were men of diminutive stature whose acts involved them impersonating children. Quite why and any of these actors, none of whom were from Liverpool or indeed died here, should choose to haunt the empire of all other theatres which they appeared at, is something of a mystery. The only thing I can think of is that many people enjoyed being in the Empire Theatre, that they felt most comfortable when here, so it would only make sense that to remain in a place that brought them so many happy memories. And there is also a phantom whistler who disturbed many rehearsals at the theatre during the 1950s, most notably those of the ballet Swan Lake. And last, but by no means least, there is a tale of a ghostly troupe of Victorian actors seen upon the stage by staff in the 1960s. The group seemed all too real at first, but there was no explanation for their being there out of hours, and certainly none of their disappearing suddenly. A member of staff seemed to recognise one of the performers in a historic programme from the theatre's archive. Her name was Mary Anderson, and she had been performing in William Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale, the same play which had been in production at the time of the sighting, some 80 years previously. Anderson actually retired from acting at the age of 30 in 1889, having returned from England to a native America. And it is thought by some that this led to the actresses suffering from a nervous exhaustion disorder and ultimately electing to retire. Mary Anderson died in 1940 in Worcestershire, England, but some might postulate that her appearance in the Empire Theatre could be part of some ghostly farewell tour. The old company getting back together and reliving the glory days of the 1888 performances. Certainly it would be interesting to find out if any of the other theatres originally visited by the tour found themselves playing host to an unexpected supernatural encore some 80 odd years later. Who knows? We don't know. We are yet to find out any possible explanation to these things, but I tell you what, I would love to investigate the Empire Theatre. I would love a few hours in there with my equipment to conduct an investigation. I think it'd be pretty cool. So I hope you enjoyed this story today. If so, please let me know in the comments below and hit the like button. And again, I'd like to give thanks to John Rippian, who has wrote a book called 800 Years of Liverpool. Such a fantastic book. So if you're interested in these things, please go check it out. There'll be a link in the description below. So for now, take care, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.